What's up guys? Today, as part of my Behind the Song series, I'm going to profile the 4 tracks from my Resistance EP, which was released in 2012, and it was produced by NDT Productions, which was Eoin, Flynn and Thom McDonnell at the time. You can hear the full EP on all streaming and download platforms right now, and let me know what you think in the comments. Track 1 is Older, which was the first single released from this EP in November 2011. This was actually the last song that I wrote for this EP, and it was the only song that I actually wrote from scratch in the studio. It was written at a piano. I was with Eoin, Flynn and Thom McDonnell, who made up NDT Productions at the time, in Camden recording studio in Dublin. And I was actually invited to work with them by a friend that I went to school with, who ended up working in the music industry. And I had kind of gone into retirement from music after my first album. I was a student at the time, and this guy from school said to me, "I really think you should work with these producers. Why don't you go in and have a meeting with them?" So we did that. But anyway, this was the last song that was recorded, and I had this kind of idea, quite staccato approach to the vocals, and it was difficult for the musicians to put that together structurally for it to make sense as a song, but we did get there, and it ended up being the first single. I think I was very inspired by the music that I was hearing at the time in a lot of the American TV shows, particularly a lot of the teen dramas like like the OC and all of those sort of programs that broke a lot of acts like Nada Surf and Death Cab for Cutie. So that's definitely where the inspiration came from. Lyrically, it is the follow-up to another song on this EP called Over, and it's kind of the story a few years on from that. So it's about really a relationship being over but not having moved on. So it's kind of a sad lyric, but at the same time there's a very optimistic feel, and I think as soon as I recorded it, I knew it was how I wanted to introduce myself back into the music scene again. Track 2 is Too Late, and this was actually never released as a single in this existing form because it was remixed by Maddie Graham when it was being released, but it definitely went down, I think, for a lot of people as their favourite on the EP, from what I read on my social media at the time. This one's actually really fun to perform live. I think there's a great energy to it. It's very summery. It kind of has that sort of Californian feel to it. My inspiration stylistically at the time was I was listening to a lot of European bands. I was listening to the French band Phoenix. I loved their really melodic approach, and like I said, it was really summery and a really positive feel-good anthem is what I wanted to create. I was listening to a lot of U2 as well, actually, City of Blinding Lights and stuff from around that era, and it kind of went in a slightly more 90s direction. I think it's got a bit of a Smiths vibe to it. It's definitely indie pop. It's the most indie I've got with anything I've done. Lyrically, it was inspired bizarrely by a stalker, and it's about them convincing me that we will see each other again, which brings on a completely different angle probably to what you imagined it was about. It's definitely not a love song, and it was somebody in the media as well, which made it even stranger. Track 3 is the title track, Resistance, which was actually written shortly after my first album came out, and I wrote it as an open letter to the music industry is what I called it at the time. And it's kind of, the idea of being resilient and persistent and all of those descriptive words. But I actually sang it at an audition for a band that I went for once, and I remember it went really well. And then my second audition was to do a cover, which didn't go well at all. So I think I was just made to sing my own songs in a lot of ways and not something that was prescribed for me. But yeah, actually when I wrote this, I imagined it being not for me, but I wanted to write something in the style of the writer-producer Max Martin, very pop and very straightforward, and that sort of chord progression that you hear in the chorus. It's quite late 90s, You could almost imagine it being like a Backstreet Boys or a Britney song, with much more pop production. But when I went to the studio and decided that I was going to include it on this EP, my musical taste had changed a lot by that point, and I was listening to Arcade Fire and a lot of alternative bands, and really I never saw myself as being able to make that sort of music, but I think this is probably the closest I came to that. It's a little bit more rough and ready, and it's a bit more raw, even though the lyric is quite pop and tongue-in-cheek. But the guys who produced this, Ian Flynn and Thom McDonnell, this was their favourite song on the record. And we got in a drummer who just really went to town on it, and I think just brought a huge amount of energy. The drums are kind of everything in this song. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. That's pretty much it. Track 4 is Over, and this was the single that came out at the same time as this EP. It would have been the very first track that was written, and it wasn't written specifically for this EP. I was just a little bit too late to put it on my first album, but I did perform it live during the promo gigs after my album came out, and it was quite a soulful, funky rendition when we performed it live. And then a few years passed before I actually went to the studio again to record Resistance, and this was the song that I was going in with first and foremost. I felt like this is absolutely a single. When I wrote the song, it was another public transport ride. I wrote it on a bus very quickly. Both lyrics and melody arrived together, which are always the best ones for me. And it was a very emotional song to write, because I think it was about I suppose I call it an affair of the heart, or a fling that never became a thing, something that I thought was going to be a great relationship that for a number of reasons never got off the ground, but it is not reflected necessarily in the production on the music on the studio version. I think in trying to be cohesive, the producers made it very much an indie pop. There's a certain mood to the lyric, and that is not reflected in the music, I think. But definitely, if I had the opportunity to record this for an unplugged record in the future, you would hear something a lot moodier and a lot more somber. So I think that might be something that will have to happen in the future, because I think at the core of it there's a great emotionally arresting song there.